I'll give the invocation, and I would like for Steve Copeland to lead us in the pledge. Would everybody stand up, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Father, we thank you for the Joint Water and Sewer Commission, and we thank you for all of our staff members. And Father, we thank you for the public that we serve. Just help us to be good stewards of the money that's invested in this organization, and just help us to bring glory to you in everything we say and do. And help us be a shining light in this community. It's in Jesus' blessed name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please follow me in the pledge. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like for everybody, all the commissioners, to review the agenda and see if there's any revisions or any changes that we need to make to the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I have one recommendation on item 10. I'd like to move that we defer that one for committee reviews, for the Facilities Committee to review that project and bring it back at the next schedule.
That would be deferring it, correct? That's item 10.
Janice, help me out. To a time certain.
Yeah.
Defer to the committee.
Correct.
Okay.
So my motion is to defer that one for review by the Facilities Committee and bring it back at the next scheduled commission meeting after that committee meets.
I second.
There's a motion to defer item 10, and there's a second. Any questions? All in favor, indicate by raising your right hand. Motion passes. Are there any other revisions?
Chairman, we do need to have an executive session right off the bat if we can, after the swearing in and public comment and employee recognition.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that?
We will once we get to that point.
Item 11, the memorandum of understanding. Do we need to defer that? Item 11. Do we need to defer that? Okay, I make a motion that we defer item 11, the memorandum MOU with the City of Brunswick for the L Street project until the next commission meeting.
I'll second.
Any questions? Everybody in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Commissioner Stevens has informed me that he will be at the meeting, but he will be late. He had a presentation he had to make at the hospital at 1:30. And we'd like to move into the commissioner's swearing-in ceremony.
Judge Young.
And Judge, go right down here by the podium, right?
Part of the swearing is you have to stand there by yourself for a while.
Oh, man.
So I couldn't tell.
That's funny.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're gonna do the same one. Okay, all right. Raise your right hand, please. I state your name.
Wayne Deal.
Do hereby solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Commissioner of the Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer further solemnly swear and affirm that I am not the holder of any unaccounted for public funds, that I am a resident of Glynn County for the time required, that I am otherwise qualified to hold said public office according to the Constitution and the laws of Georgia, and that I will support and defend the local act enabling the Brunswick-Glynn County Water and Sewer Commission, as well as the Constitution of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
I do so solemnly swear.
Very good, congratulations. Okay, and I'll just stop at five, you just let me know when that is, okay? All right, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to move the public comment period. We would like to limit the public comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, Ms. Monica Smith has public comment today for the workshop.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Monica Smith, and this is now starting my 5th year of observing this organization. And I congratulate you all for your membership and for your already dedicated service. As you know, I was here yesterday, or I was at the meeting yesterday, and I just thought I'd provide a few comments. My basic interest is, of course, in clean water and waste disposal as being basic to the health and welfare of our community. And I didn't hear that topic discussed much yesterday. Most of your time seemed to be dedicated to talking about money, including, I'm presuming, that first hour of executive session in which we were excluded. And then after that, I was given a copy of the Water and Sewer Master Plan update from 2015. Going over that briefly today, I realized that I did not pay sufficient attention to this master plan when it was adopted by the commission, because here too, we do not have any kind of emphasis on providing services to passed over communities, passed over parts of the city, passed over Sea Island, for example, which has many, many septic tanks which need to be integrated into a central system. And the capital improvement elements in here seem to be directed mostly towards industrial development and the industrial parks. And I really think that we need to put people in front of corporations. So if we have people in this community in Glynn County within the service area that are not being served, I hope that you will make that a high priority in the coming year. Thank you very much.
I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your attending our meetings for so many years. That's great. And there is something on the agenda later on that will be addressing one of your comments, Ms. Smith. Now we'll move ahead to the employee recognition. Commissioner Harvey.
Thank you.
And on the agenda,
Would it be a benefit?
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also Commissioner for allowing me to present this certificate certification for water operator class 2 rate license.
I'd like Mr.
John's gonna bring it to July.
That's correct.
Yeah, you got it. Good. I always say the best comes to doing water sewer, and July is a testament that you come in here and also being part of this organization, and also working upon the supervision that you do, work upon it provides opportunities for you to move up, and be with a great organization on water and sewer. So this certificate states, and also the
these employee recognitions are really important, and we certainly want to thank every one of our employees who pass these certification tests, because they have to go, it's a rigorous test, and they have to spend a lot of time gaining experience too. And they're really the backbone of our organization. So thank you, Commissioner Harvey, for making that presentation. I think now we need to enter into executive session. Is it, we need to make a motion?
Move to go into executive session.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. And what's the executive session about? Property. Okay. Hopefully it'll be a short executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I move we come out of executive session.
Second.
All in favor? Next thing on the agenda is approval of minutes from the January 10th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we read the minutes as reflected. I mean, approve the minutes as reflected.
I'll second.
All in favor? Motion passes. The next item is the minutes from the January 10th, 2019 executive session.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we, for approval of the minutes of, executive session for January 10th, 2019.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Janice, do we have the minutes from the workshop?
They're behind tab number 3. We passed the executive minutes back, please.
They're on their way.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the minutes from January 10th, 2019 Commission Workshop.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Motion passed. Item 4, health benefits renewal.
Hello.
Hello.
In your packets, you will see that you have a memo and 2 supporting documents that were sent to you last week. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And so as you know, I'm not sure how much you all have had a chance to speak with the other commissioners. We did have a small committee meet to go over some of the details of the health insurance. We normally would do that in an open meeting, but it takes several hours. And so we dug into everything that we possibly could in quite a bit of detail. We first met with staff to go over the larger picture and then narrowed it down to that committee and spent some time. After a lot of discussion and consideration, we did come up with a recommendation of 3 new plans for the commission. And that was keeping in mind the discussion we had back in October with the commission, just as a review of what the overall goals were. One of which is to offer a competitive benefits package, but 2, we also have to move the needle forward in a situation where health insurance continues to rise well beyond anything that anyone can budget for. So in these new plans, you will see that we have added a 3rd option that includes a health savings account that we think that employees may or may not have an interest in, but at least we're starting to educate them on those plans so we can further move in the direction that we need to overall, so we can meet the goals financially, but also keep a benefits package that the employees can depend on. So today, what we're hoping is you all can have any discussion that we would like. We're happy to answer any questions. Do you commissioners have any comments or anything to add that were in the meeting?
I want to thank you, Ms. Tyndall. I want to thank the staff and the ad hoc committee for meeting on this. Are we ready to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the approval be granted to enter to accept the recommendations of the ad hoc committee and offer the attached 3 healthcare benefit plan options with employer-employee cost contributions as listed in the
I
attachment.
second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any questions? All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Tyndall.
Thank you very much, and I just want to say that, again, thank you to the staff, and as you said, thank you to those commissioners that were in that meeting. I think it was really an efficient use of time, and the outcome was favorable, and I hope you all feel as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. The next item is the bank resolutions and signature authorizations. Ms. Wilson?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Frances Wilson. The item before you is a fairly routine item. The JWSC needs new banking documentation anytime that we add or remove names of those who are authorized to act on behalf of the commission in dealing with BB&T. Our current policy requires 2 signatures, the executive director and the director of finance, on any check issued for $5,000 or more. In the absence of either of these 2 people, it would be necessary to have the chairman, the vice chairman, or our senior finance analyst to sign checks. So staff recommends that the chairman, vice chairman, and the senior finance analyst of the JWSC be authorized signatories on the bank accounts of the JWSC, and that the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, director of finance, and the senior finance analyst be authorized to execute the necessary banking resolutions and signature cards with BB&T.
May I ask a question? Related to this, is there any, I mean, do we bounce this kind of off the people that do our audits and say, is this generally accepted, or do we just know this is kind of the way it's done in the industry? Is it specifically related to 2 people in finance being kind of the backups?
Pretty much standard.
Okay, I just knew we'd had some, audit things that said, about separation of duties. I didn't know if that furthered that, or if that just was kind of neutral to it, or helped it.
Actually, most of the separation of duties happens prior to the actual signing of the check.
Okay.
But even within this process, there is 2 or more people who are looking at transactions, whether they're transferring funds or signing checks.
I just knew there had been discussion in the past that, from other commissioners about the concern when we talked about adding other people about what those 2 people in the same department. So I didn't know if 2 people being in the same department was an issue or not. Just a question. If it's not, then we'll move on.
We have the executive director, he's outside of finance, and of course, then we would have the chairman and the vice chairman if necessary.
But was a senior finance analyst,
That's
is that
LaDonna
always
Roberts.
been on it, or is that?
That's something new?
That's something new, LaDonna Roberts.
Right, and that's
I
what
know
we're
it
looking
is,
at.
but see, then we got 2 people in the same.
You have 2 people in finance, in other words. If it's not Jimmy, if Jimmy's out, instead of calling the chair, the executive chair, then that's
Well,
2 people in finance.
I think this is for signing checks that require dual signature, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if John's not here to sign a check, then that allows LaDonna to sign the check, and then the director or the chairman or the vice chairman can sign the check. I don't think you really have an issue with that the director and the senior financial analyst are signing checks, but it is something that there needs to be either or written into this such that you don't have that occur. You
That's
understand what I'm
ultimately
saying?
what I was-
Where the bank is gonna take the check and see that it has 2 signatures.
Right.
We need to have a policy incorporated in this that says that, John and LaDonna can't be the both signatures.
Right, has to be one or the other, yes, I agree.
Okay, usually our standard is John and executive director.
No, I understand
So- Right,
what we've done in the past,
right.
but you're adding a new wrinkle into it. And what the commissioners are concerned about is that
The finance
we are
department.
always
Yeah, I
getting caught on, separation of duties. And now you have 2 people that are in the same department that are signing, are the 2 people that can sign checks together. It's not that collusion would occur, but
Keeps it
it
from.
opens it a little bit for collusion.
Didn't we pass a motion a couple of years ago that made the 4 signatures appropriate?
No,
That
we
added the
didn't.
It
vice?
wasn't all 4, it's 2
No,
of the 4.
just-
It was just 2 of the 4, but it added the vice to the list.
That's correct.
And
That
so
was-
the only thing we're doing here is to add the senior treasury analyst?
The senior finance analyst.
Yes.
At
Or
one time, we
finance
had the finance committee chair as the 5th person.
In the motion, if we change that to say director of finance or senior finance analyst be authorized.
And I remember, I remember at one time, I said, well, why not add the deputy director? And I said, well, you don't want 2 people from the same department
Right.
doing it. So, we could, maybe it's where, 2 signatures, one from operations, one from finance. So either the deputy or the executive director on this side of the fence, and the director of finance or the senior finance person on this side of the fence, but not 2 people from this side, 2 people from this side. Not that there's a
Understand.
fence, but that's all I was.
Adding LaDonna to this does, as Commissioner Elliott stated, if I'm out of the office for us to track down a commissioner to have the second signature on that. It also is part of Ladonna's training in finance, in that when you, and I've been doing this for years, and as I go through the checks, I recognize the vendors and I recognize about what they should be paid each month, and it's just from looking at them so many times. And that will lend a great deal of insight into the disbursements to Ladonna as well.
And I think that part makes sense, and you know, I
Okay.
don't mean to belabor the point, but if Jimmy's out, then it's two people from finance doing it. So I almost think it should be your backup's LaDonna, his backup's Andrew, and, you know, but it takes one from each side, if that makes sense, but that's just my.
Seems like what we
2
have
cents.
what we have right now is adequate without even adding this step.
Well, if one person's out, then that means one of y'all two's got to sign, which is, in my opinion, undue burden. I mean, you're in Atlanta and he's on the job.
If y'all are out,
I
you
think,
two are probably the most traveled.
We've got 4 people already. I mean, with just 2 signatures.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a motion, so, and if it's seconded, that we can continue the discussion if necessary. I move that Brunswick-Glynn County Joint Water and Sewer Commission approve the chairman and vice chairman of the JWSC as authorized signatories on the bank accounts of the JWSC, and that the chairman, vice chairman, executive director, director of finance, or senior finance analyst be authorized to execute the necessary banking resolutions and signature cards with BB&T Bank.
I second that.
Is there any questions on the motion? All in favor? Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is approval of purchase cards, P cards.
Commissioners, over the last couple of months, we have been working with, or probably longer, working with BB&T Bank on looking into establishment of a purchasing card program. We've come to the point now where we would need authorizations to open an account to start this pilot program. In the memorandum that you have, there are about 7 points listed by the Government Finance Officers Association in their best practices guide as reasons for, positive reasons for instituting a purchasing card program. So we're asking that the JWSC approve the authorization of using purchasing cards, and that the chairman and executive director be authorized to sign the documents to establish the accounts. And we're actually starting this on a pilot program right now and on a very limited rollout until we determine exactly what the bank software will do for us and in tracking of purchases and so on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a motion, please.
Okay?
I move that JWSC approve the use of purchasing cards and authorize the chairman and executive director to execute the documents necessary to establish a program with BB&T Bank.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions?
I have some questions. Have you established a guide more than this that says how the purchase cards are gonna be managed? And what purchases are gonna be made and who's gonna use them?
We have several policy and procedures manuals from, I believe from the state of Georgia's purchasing card and 3 or 4 other local governments that we're using as templates. We're working through, we need to work through the particulars of how the BB&T Bank card works to incorporate those into those other policies. They're pretty much all written, they're very similar, but there are slight differences between each of them, and that's one of the things that we're working on in the pilot.
Is it like a credit card?
It's, in that it's a card, yes.
Does it have limits on it?
Yes, it does. It can have, has individual limits. It can be set and adjusted
Yeah,
as
most,
necessary.
Thank you. Sorry, John. Mr. Chairman, typically these are, when the plans are set up, finance can choose by department what their fence is what they can play in, what their limits are, for example. And you can do that at every level of employee who is authorized to use a P card. And so it helps with their accounting very quickly to get that feedback on where those purchases are made. Oftentimes, there's an application for an expense report, if you will, that can be made so that when the employees turn in an expense report, if you choose that application, then it lines up with the statement that the bank or whatever financial institution is used. And so it provides a very quick audit of those initial purchases, and frankly, it helps with the documentation.
And not only can the cards be limited by division, by employee and so on, they can be limited to certain types of vendors as well.
How does this work with our tax exemption?
There's,
I mean, each person we buy from has to have our tax exemption on file and make sure that,
yeah, they do anyway.
so this isn't just,
We provide a tax exemption form to all of our vendors.
so this person is not, if this is not on already on a defined list before, this is not being able to add something quickly to the other.
Well, we should be able to add that vendor as quickly as we do using the requisition process now.
So we have a standard tax exempt form, and when you want to request tax exemption, you'd have the card and the form, and the person would go to take the tax exempt off. Like, for example, if we were to just go to Walmart or Target and use it, all you have to do is go to the service desk and present that certificate and the card once we get the tax exemption.
That'll happen in real time with the,
Does this card, would it fall under the same policy of 2 signatures required over 5,000? Or,
Well, there aren't really, that would be defined by the purchasing limits that the individual card holder had. But there probably won't be many cards issued with very large limits.
Mr. Donaghy, I had one quick question. I thought we discussed this as well. A lot of the institutions and organizations that use the P cards also get a certain amount of reimbursement based on the use through their program. So we'll actually be getting additional cash flow back as a result of using these P cards on the vendors that we're working with.
That's one of the advantages that were listed by the GFOA in their best practices.
Any other questions? There's a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Next item is role, conduct, and responsibilities of Commission policy revision. Our
Good
attorney.
afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you, Chairman. You have for you today a memo and corresponding policy that shows the red line revisions to the role, conduct, responsibilities of the JWSC Commissioners policy. As you recall, when I was presenting this policy during the orientation meeting 2 weeks ago, which Commissioner Neal, you're welcome to get on YouTube and take a gander at that if you have trouble sleeping at night. But during the presentation, I noted that there were a couple of changes that need to be made, some typos and miswordings. So I've made those changes to Section 7 and Section 8. In the memo, I've copied the correct wording, and in the policy, you'll have the red line that'll show the changes that have been made. This policy was enacted in 2007, and to my knowledge, has never been revised, and it's not noted on the policy that it's ever been revised.
All the commissioners reviewed the changes. Do I have a motion?
I move we adopt the changes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, indicate by raising your right hand. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Diamond. Next item is the Mallory Street land swap.
Yes, sir. The JWSC, as a couple of the commissioners know, we've been working on this project for quite some time. This was originally one of Colonel Boland's pet projects from a few years ago. JWSC owns a parcel of land off of Mallory Street on St. Simon's Island that has in the past been the site of an elevated water tower, but that is currently not being used, and there is no water tower on the property. The land is bordered by land owned by the Holy Nativity Church. Holy Nativity wishes to give a parcel of their land to the JWSC in exchange for the JWSC site so that they may have additional parking. The properties have been appraised and the JWSC parcel determined to be approximately 6,000 feet and worth $190,000 as compared to the church property being approximately 5,100 square feet and worth $185,000. The JWSC proposes to exchange the ownership of the parcel with Holy Nativity and obtain ownership of the parcel that is actually near the road. I believe there's a map included in the appraisal. To account for the price difference, the church has agreed to pay the costs associated with the transfer.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I hereby move that the Joint Water Sewer Commission approve the exchange of properties with the Holy Nativity Church and authorize the chairman to execute the quitclaim deed.
I'll second the motion.
Are there any questions? All in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Next item on the agenda is the North Cottages encroachment.
Yes, sir. You have before you an encroachment agreement that relates to Lot 21 as outlined on the included plat for Sea Palms North Cottages. As you'll see on Lot 21 on the southern boundary, which is on the right-hand side of the property, there's a 20-foot easement for sewer, 10 feet of which encroaches upon Lot 21. The builder contacted us back in October after he had laid the foundation and began vertical construction of the house and informed us that there was that the foundation had been laid improperly. We have worked with the developer and with the county to get all county approvals for this piece of property, and we've now negotiated an encroachment agreement which I believe will protect us should there be any JWSC construction within the easement. The encroachment is approximately somewhere between a foot and a foot and a half into the 10-foot easement, 20-foot easement.
Do I hear a motion that we accept the,
Mr. Chairman, I move that the chairman be authorized to execute the encroachment agreement related to Lot 21 North Cottages on condition that the developer reimburse the Joint Water Sewer Commission for staff and attorney time spent in this regard.
second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. And now we're moving to the discussion items. First item is wastewater treatment plant flows for Mark Riles.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. We at the final month of the year for 18. During this month, it was a heavy rain month in some areas, and inflow and infiltration showed it's reared its head. If we want to start with Academy Creek flows, as you can see, we had a effluent flow of 11.4. Came out about 80%, 84%. Influent parameters in front of you here. Cause of the flow, of course, they drop. The effluent concentrations that we are permitted on, follow those. With a decent removal of 92.56% of BOD and a little drop in removal of TSS at 88.46. the rain, as you can see, 8.41 was, according to my rain gauge right there at Academy Creek, 8.4 inches total for the month.
Regarding that, I would like to ask if we can review the pump run times for that month and just see which pumps were running what station, because obviously we have some II in the system, and that would help maybe isolate what area of the system it's in.
We're actively doing
Okay. 73.21 dry tons of sludge removal for the month. Moving on to Dunbar Creek. Again, some I dictate the flow being high as it was along with the rain in that area. 8.262 rainfall, by the highest flows. But getting back to the beginning here, that number there is a little bit, 4.4 in, 3.6 out. Got to check on that. Influent concentrations, pretty little bit below average because of the rain flow. Effluent concentrations, parameters. We did violate one parameter, which is 46 on intercoci. Our limit is 35, so we have a notice of violation from the EPD on that. That's the UV system we had over there, which we had a lot of ups and downs with. We spent a lot of money on it. We're just trying to contain it, but we also check the plant twice a day. We shut down about 4:30 in the evening, but we send another operator over late in the evening to monitor the plant. We also monitor it through SCADA. So when we get a call out from SCADA to go check it, even though we had already checked it during a 2-hour round period, we've been having some issues with the UV. We're really working out. It's just one of those type of piece of equipment that needs attention. And it's very important that we keep it, working at its highest efficiency because of the fact that it does could give us what we got this month with notice of violation for the 46 on the intercoci. But we, like I said, we working with it heavily. We have a contract that comes out and do a complete overhaul twice a year. And we buy a lot of new equipment for it, a lot of spare parts. It's a costly item, I should say. Moving on, we did do
Excuse me. Now for a question here. In regard to that item, Mr. Rouse, do we know how many hours that we exceeded the limits?
No, it's actually based on a sample.
It's a 24-hour
24-hour sample, composite sample.
Okay.
Take samples every 15 minutes and puts a little bit in the choke. So it could have been a really bad hour. Threw the math out of whack on us. It's a 24-hour composite sample.
Okay,
All the samples are composite.
so exceeding the requirement one time in the month is going to spike our limit chart here.
It very much could.
Okay. Is there any mitigating actions that can be taken to avoid this?
Basically, just monitor. We monitor SCADA. We monitor call out through SCADA. Just response time, basically, getting there because it's not a 24-hour manned plant.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So for the year 2018, we'll average over 70% for the whole year. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And at what point
73%.
do we start to be concerned that with an increase in rainfall and increase in development that we're going to have some problems with capacity because we're only permitted for 4 million, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we think we have enough size to go to 5, but we've not.
Well, basically, we was depending on the study of the I&I flow to see how much available space.
Okay, but I&I is gonna take how long?
That's been in the works for the,
Smoke testing RFP is out right now. When that smoke testing RFP comes back, that's probably a 90 to 120 day contract to figure out. We'll find a lot of home runs with that hopefully, because when you look at I&I, the two I's, the rainwater or the groundwater is much harder to get out. But even if you've got, I'm just throwing random numbers out, 500,000 gallons of groundwater getting in the system, it doesn't cause the spikes in the average. It's those days where you get a lot of rainflow and then you get 8 and 10 coming through the plant that are causing the elevated averages. So knock the top off of the spikes and then the average will decrease as proportionate, because I mean, you can get up to 11 going through Dunbar Creek. Not over the month, but over a 1 day period, and then you've got that much flow, which is actually 4 days worth of flow going through the plant.
How long we allow to exceed the permit?
There is no discharge limit on daily flow. It is a monthly parameter. There is a loading limit based off the flow times concentration. So theoretically, if you got too high, you would put too much load out. But it's a monthly limit, so those specific days at Dunbar, we are at 10 or 11, do impact the overall average.
So 1 month, you're at 101, what happens?
It's a violation, just like the intercockeye.
And let me say this, that when the flow is up like that, generally the BOD, influent BOD is down, so the wastewater strength is a lot less, so we're treating basically the same amount of what we need to treat, so.
yes, sir. Absolutely.
And I think the II will provide us additional capacity once we get it under control.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Riles.
And at about 75%, average, we need to start looking at expanding, doing something strenuous to compensate for those extra high flows. And we got some things in the capital that's gonna go on to help us out.
Right, and we have a G for loan application where we're going to be doing something in Dunbar Creek also.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll be discussing that here in a minute.
Going on to Southport, it's funny that Southport, I guess where it's located at, and having a better system, not a whole lot of flow going on out there, but as you can see, through all the rain that we did have on this side of town and on the island, the flows didn't really increase that much out there at Southport. So it did fairly well through the month, as it normally does. Again, plant is set up for 1.5, but we hardly ever get there. We may use a third of it at one time or another, but it seems to be doing very well. So slow-moving plant, well-maintained. Not a whole lot of activity going on as far as violation goes. We do periodic maintenance out there, proactive maintenance, of course. And the plant has been online since 2011, so we've been keeping it up pretty good. It's not been a costly plant for us.
Mr. Riles, how many certified operators do you have working for you?
Sir, I have 13 operators, and 2 of them are in training. 3 of them are in training right now. I do have a good overall class rating of operators.
Good.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I'll be bringing 2 of them before the board here within the next couple of meetings that just recently got certifications.
Good.
Mr. Riles, who handles your administrative stuff for you?
Variety here and there. I have a couple of administrators over in the main building and downtown. Gets a little help from administration downtown. But it's just to keep me going and someone I can depend on. Everybody pitches in, but it's not like having somebody directly that I can go to and feed off that.
Okay, so basically you need an administrative person.
Would like to have a dedicated person, yes, sir.
Okay. Another question I have, this may be for Jimmy. How many customers do we have at exit 29, Southport? How many customers do we have on that system?
Wow, I don't have the number right.
Approximately.
Maybe 1,000 or so, 1,500.
Okay, are we looking to increase that? I mean, well, we always looking to increase that. You know,
Well, I mean,
what's
yeah,
our-
where we can. In fact, we just expanded the capacity to allow for more construction down there. And I think one of the things staff has noted is that there's along Buck Swamp Road, we've got a lot of communities, neighborhoods that have been built that are built on, depending on septic tanks. Eventually, those tanks and the field lines are going to wear out. There is a force main that comes down to the plant. We may be able to pick up some fill-in customers that way, but right now, there's no substantial growth anticipated.
Have we talked to our legislators to see about, I don't mean to force people to get into our system, but to give incentives, some type of way for them to tie into our system?
I have not, but we can. The issue would be, if they don't perceive a need at their home, they don't want to tackle it without something motivating them to do it. Either failing septic tanks or a reduced cost to them somehow, and I don't see how this would be a reduced cost.
Okay.
How many maintenance staff do we have for the 3 plants?
I have 4, 5. Glenn, count 5. It's 5. I have a supervisor, 5 supervisors.
5 spread between all 3 plants.
Sir.
And one's an electrician?
No, we don't have an electrician on my staff.
We have an electrician with the collections group that works with all the parties.
So, are they mechanics?
Yes, sir. They're pretty good at what they do. I got a good supervisor running that area, very diligent. He, very, very good. I think we hired Mr. Glynn a couple of years ago. He was very needed at the time, and I think he's did very well last couple of years. He's also a Class 3 operator, so he's been around a while.
So he's pulling double duty?
Well, he's on call. He got a couple guys on call. Right now, he got 1 or 2 new hires, 2 new hires that he just hired, but the other 2 guys that he have, they are all 3 of those on call.
He does not operate the plant except.
No, he don't operate the plant.
Are you and Mr. Riles, are you involved in the loading up the CMMS, the maintenance management system?
I'm involved with finding the problems and directing the way the solution need to be taken care of.
Dealing with the issues as they're occurring real time.
Yes, sir.
We're going through all the critical infrastructure at each of the plants, providing the O&M suggestions from the manuals, and I am in the process of loading all of that into the CMMS. Started with the headworks in 3 plants thus far, getting all that loaded in.
So the buck stops with you.
It is a very tedious process.
I like to say in the future we gonna have a young man that came to me with a program that we working on right now that we like to present to commission at a future date to help the operators out and to get more feet on the ground on the plant and less paperwork going through, where from the cradle to the grave, when you enter the data, it populates all the way up to the net DMR that we submit to EPD. And it's almost like a snapshot of every day of every round that's being done. And I think it'd be very helpful to us, but we'll be trying to bring that forward later on in the future, very near future. Questions about the flow, sir?
That's a good report. Thank you, Mr. Riles.
Yes, sir.
Next item is cutoff policy impact on federal workers. Commissioner Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman. That one's mine, and I asked for us to have some discussion on that, and I think it was just to understand how we can adjust our process and procedure for cutoffs, and I'll ask our executive director if he'd offer some comments to us about how we'll put that in place.
We've had discussions with staff already, and the concept that came to our mind is that if somebody has a turn that off, sorry. If we do have furloughed federal employees who have an issue with their finances and having a problem, what we've established as a protocol is, bring your your cards, ID badges in to identify yourselves. We'll set up an agreement with the employee on a case-by-case basis to get payment certain 30 days after the federal government reopens for business in full. So we've got a process. It's not a blanket thing. We will look at it on a case-by-case as if there's problems or historical issues already existing. We're not offering the same deal to those individuals.
Okay, so I'll try to paraphrase what you offered so I can understand that in general, if a federal employee that's been furloughed needs some assistance, then they won't go on the cutoff list right away if they miss a payment.
They need to let us know what's going on.
They'll come in and set up a payment agreement with you so that we'll have a record of that. And then once they return back to work and receive their pay, then is it 30 days after that, then they'll have to pay
That's correct.
What's past due?
Within
basically.
30 days of the federal government open, whatever is, due, past due, as you say, that'll all have to be paid up in full at that point.
Okay. I like the process, and I think it shows some sensitivity on our part to be able to offer that to folks that are experiencing some difficulty right now. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The next item on the agenda is G for applications for Academy Creek and sewer rehab update.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, we've submitted all the documents and requests for engineering and financial data. Everything that's needed to be turned in on the application for $15 million has been turned in. It was applications for 10 and 5 separately, 10 for the renovations to the Academy Creek and the Dunbar Creek plants where we have some fixes that need to be made, and $5 million for I&I to address the I&I issues we talked about. There will be some differences in the rates, and we'll get a consolidated rate over that $15 million. The board, as far as the way I understand it, everything's there. They should be have final approval of our SERP submissions by then, and the board will be meeting on May 4th to review and approve it. I understand, based on discussions with the GFA folks, that efforts that Buddy Carter's staff, Hart Thompson, has made and on our behalf here in the last few months will probably help us in getting early review in the stack as opposed to just waiting until it shakes out.
And when can we have an engineer hired to do this work?
We're working through the details right now on what we want to include in the scope of work for it. I've got a letter into the county right now to request transfer of the funds that we talked about in the previous meeting. As soon as we get the funds, we should have the scope of work ready to develop an RFP. I'm hoping by like March, before then, so before March.
Well, we need to spend some money at Academy Creek, and we need to do it just as quick as we can. So
I understand.
we need to,
Yes, sir, I agree.
We need to get the engineering contract let too, so we can move just as fast as we can.
We will.
The next is an update from for the FEMA-GEMA grant applications. Ms. Crosby?
Good afternoon. Thank you. What you have before you, there should be a handout that Janice has given everyone. It's just a quick recap on where we are with our FEMA grant applications. There are two programs. There's a 406 program that is more focused on trying to reimburse you for damages that happen during a disaster. So that's the first block. That's the table at the top. You'll see the 4 open projects that we had. Basically, the way the FEMA programs work is it's a 75% reimbursement of what you submit and they approve. So we submitted $629,000 in damages and expenses, and on the 8th of January, we received 4 checks for those 4 in the amount of $425,143.91. So those are all of the claims that we had outstanding as far as damages. And so that's related to the 406 program with the events that happened with Hurricane Matthew. So you can sometimes, the damage that happens that gets repaired, also pair that, if you'll move down to the next section, with 404 and apply for mitigation assistance. So in other words, something happened, we had something that maybe could be avoided, or we could change the facilities, harden them in some way, if we could, to maybe in the future not have that same disaster or another potential disaster. So we've talked about these before, but I think someone was looking for an update. It's the 404 for our project internally here called 801, and it's the generator project, which would be the 3 stationary generators for Academy Creek Wastewater Treatment Facility, and then the 5 portable generators that can be utilized throughout our system for lift stations or other areas. And then also there's a separate program that GEMA, which is the Georgia Emergency Management, it's FEMA money, but GEMA will administer it. It's for 41 transfer stations at our priority lift stations. So basically all of those are in the works. We earlier this year received phase 1 approval on the application process, which means you sort of do a pre-app or a general idea of what you're going to do, and then you're approved to move to a phase 2 application. So the deadline for phase 2 application is next week, January 31st. So we're working with our grant consultant and also a few final pieces we need from Glynn County because they're the sponsoring jurisdiction, or they handle everything disaster related. So some of their mitigation plans, what we're planning to do with the generators, they just have to add those components into their plan so that from a community-wide basis, it's going to work with their overall plan for disaster preparedness. So if anybody has any other questions, the amounts are on here, and I can get into the specifics of some of these projects, but as far as the actual 404 project and the lift stations, we've done some preliminary engineering work, and the final cost estimates will be due March 15th. So right now we just have that budget that we've set aside. I think it's $3.1 million. Todd reports on it each month on his project report. And so far, the only charges that, we've incurred are our consultant fees and engineering fees for an electrical engineer to help us with some of the work, because we don't have someone on staff that can do that. So we'll just continue to report that on the monthly project until somebody wants a more specific update or we hit some big milestone.
Which engineering firm is doing the generator installation?
So we actually had Benny Williams out of Savannah, because actually there's no electrical engineer here in Brunswick. So we had basically 2 choices out of Savannah and 1 out of Statesboro that we talked to about doing this project.
Have they explored one machine and 3 transfer switches? They're I guess, did we give them, hey, this is what we want, or do we say this is our end goal and this is what we want you to design to?
No, we told them the
You're
areas.
talking about for using one large machine in Academy versus 3 smaller
Right.
machines. We did look at that, but you had to rewire basically the whole plant because of the way it's all in separate circuits.
Well, you could just have transfer switches at each location and then one machine that
Right.
feeds the bus.
Right. It would take some.
Y'all did look at that, though, okay.
It would take
All
some
right.
effort to get that done based off the way that everything's laid out there.
Do you know when we might get the GEMA grant?
The GEMA grant, so like I said, the application for phase 2, the deadline is January, and then the final cost estimates are March. After we give the final applications next week, what they told us is we'll have a call within the week or 2, and what'll happen there is they'll look at that final application, and basically if there's any holes in what we provided or gaps in the information, we'll have until March 15th to provide that. So it
So
won't be
we-
until then for sure that we know that we've received it.
We've already received the $425,000.
Yes, sir. So that's our reimbursement on what we had submitted it's been over a year ago that we would have submitted those initial things. So it takes a while, and that's one of the things just from a funding perspective. That's why we have that 3.1 earmark, because the way the program works is you spend all the money and complete the project, and what's approved gets reimbursed. So that's why it's real critical that throughout the project, you're connected with GEMA, FEMA, and you're, working all the rules and following all the guidelines, because you want the maximum reimbursement that you can get. But it'll also be a 75% grant.
In regards to that $425,000,
Yes.
when it was reimbursed, where did that end up back in our funds? Under what sort of line item would we see that $425,000 credit?
It goes back into a revenue account for damage reimbursement.
So it doesn't go into a reserve, it'll go into a revenue account?
Because we've already expended that out of our, I'm assuming, operating budgets.
Yes, the expenditures that were incurred were charged to the operating budget, so the money that's reimbursed for that is reimbursed back to the operating budget.
And so this was money spent in FY 2018, fiscal year 18, and then we credit it back to the 19 budget. Did we hire a consultant or an engineering firm or anybody who helped us file all of these applications in order to get the 425?
Yes. And so we have, those fees that we have booked to the project. So if you were to look at the project sheet, you'd see those expenses that we've incurred for that so far.
For that?
Mm-hmm. So all that'll be charged to our project. And some of that, depending on what level and the different ways that we handled the solicitations for them and that sort of thing, some of that can be reimbursed by what they call a DAC. And I can't explain what the acronym is, but I know it's the DAC form, and it's for consultant and help work that you would get from outside sources, because FEMA realizes that you don't have all the experts on board to file all of these grant work yourself a lot of times.
So do you know what the outside cost was to get the $425,000 reimbursement?
I'd have to break it down because I don't necessarily have it project by project by project. I know the grant consultant, we're working with them on an hourly basis, so I could probably go back and calculate that, but right now we've just made it one big project. But the majority of the work that person has done is really on the 404, which is the big project down here that we haven't received anything out. The four projects at the top, the majority of that, our financial analyst did those submissions.
A lot of the hurricane damage reimbursements were largely done in-house with the help of, with FEMA personnel, with some help from the consultants, but that was.
Right, so the process there would be usually the financial analyst would prepare all the documents. There's a portal everything has to be uploaded to, and what we would do is have the consultant kind of look through it for us before we did the final submissions. So, if we were blatantly putting something in there that was ineligible, they would go, no, this isn't going to, you don't have the documentation for it or whatever.
And there are no issues, as far as we know, with meeting the January 31st application deadline?
No problems. Yeah, well, a lot of it has been submitted, yes.
Vast majority of it's already turned in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you went on the portal and looked at up all the backup documentation that has to be uploaded there, it's pretty overwhelming, the amount of documentation for these projects. And then even after the documents are there, there's, verification and clarification on what they see. So there'll still be some back and forth between now and March on these. So.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
The next thing is lift station 4003 upgrade proposal update.
So this will be a real quick update. Yesterday, we received proposals for 4003. We received 7 proposals, and we have distributed the proposals to our 3-person evaluation team. The plan is to be back at the next meeting, which I believe is February 7th, with a recommendation for approval for those engineering services for 4003.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next item on the agenda is a water line replacement projects update. Todd Klein.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I've got a couple updates on 3 projects in particular, water line projects. And I'll start with Magnolia Park and talk about L Street, since those are 2 similar projects in nature, and finish up with Sea Palms. So Magnolia Park is a City of Brunswick SPLOST 2016 funded project. It's a roadway and drainage project, and Joint Water Sewer Commission is a team member in that project in a cooperative sense to address the water and sewer in the within the project scope. We always stay in communication with our city and county colleagues to see if there's any projects or work going on, roadway and drainage. If there's anything else we can do while they're in there tearing up the streets, repairing and placing so we can go in there and disturb the neighborhood or the area at one time. This was a such project. It's an existing network of 6-inch transite water mains, or asbestos cement is another. Transite is kind of a Coca-Cola nomenclature for that. Joint Water Sewer Commission does try to proactively replace those water mains when the opportunity presents itself. Project was deemed worthy to be added to the capital projects list, largely due to that fact they're trying to replace AC lines. And as I mentioned before, disturbed the neighborhood only one time. The intent was to fund it with repair and replacement funds, budget of $1.1 million. It's on the capital project list, and you'll see that in there on our spreadsheet that we share with the board every month. Right now, status of it, we're finalizing the design with the engineer of record, who's EMC Engineering. Joint Water Sewer Commission did enter with the MOU with the City of Brunswick for the engineering design, and that's what we did with that project. So where it stands now, we're waiting on some feedback from the City Fire Marshal. So the intent, or the original, the first stab at it is pretty much a broad sweep of increasing to 8-inch mains. There are some hydrants, existing hydrants in there. They don't quite meet the 500 feet spacing the fire marshal likes to see. If we're waiting on feedback from him, if that's a requirement, the mains will likely have to stay 8-inch to support those fire hydrants or any new additional fire hydrants. That is a city and a county subdivision regulation requirement, minimum 8-inch mains to serve fire hydrants or new fire hydrants. We are looking at that project to see where we can reduce the line sizes for two reasons: to save cost wherever possible, but also to, in a water quality sense, the larger the mains, if you don't have the necessary movement through the mains, you can suffer some water quality issues there. So that's where that project stands. We're going through the final design review of that. Hopefully we'll have that done soon. And similar project, L Street.
Can I ask you a question on Magnolia Park? When do you think we're gonna start construction on that project? We'll have to bid it, but when is, the city probably wants to move pretty quick with it, I would think.
They do. They have a lot of interest in, there are 3 projects in particular for roadway and drainage the city has on the table for SPLOST funds. There's College Park, drainage project there, L Street, and then Magnolia Park. So they do have a lot of interest in moving those forward. Depending on how soon we can get the feedback on the hydrant spacing, that determines the main sizes. Finalizing the final design. City will take probably 30 days to advertise. I would say it's going to be early spring, probably before we would see construction earliest out there.
Okay, we just don't want to hold up the city on paving the streets, so we need to.
Correct. Hopefully we'll get that feedback soon from the fire marshal. L Street, similar project, as mentioned, it was a group of 3 projects. Another one where City of Brunswick, any chance we, or opportunity we have to work cooperatively with either city or county again, they're going in L Street, replace, improve the drainage and replace the roadway. The opportunity there was to clean up a lot of miscellaneous existing water mains out there. The belief was that there was a lot of transite out there. Once again, the initiative to replace the transite where possible, undersized mains, etc., and also consolidate with new materials. And this is the scope of the project, essentially from Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard all the way to Glen Avenue or Highway 17, down in front of Pinova and Stadium Street, down to that. That's the length of the project, pretty lengthy project. The status of that project right now, we did enter an MOU again with the City of Brunswick for the engineering design. EMC is the engineer of record for that project. Design was completed, and waterline extension equates to a new 12-inch main in between Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and Glen Avenue. That was put out for a construction bid. Bids were received. City of Brunswick received one responsive bid on that. The way that the bid was advertised was broken up into two different divisions. Division 1 was roadway and drainage improvements, essentially the city's portion, and Division 2 was the water and sewer, Joint Water Sewer Commission's portion. And equally divided some mobilization costs and some roadway replacements and that type of thing. The original budget and engineers' estimate of probable cost was around $650,000. Bid came in right around $1 million, so a good bit over budget as well as projected cost. Went back and talked with the one responsive bidder. They sharpened their pencil on some areas, and we had a hard discussion on quantities and scope and that type of thing, and their revised pricing came back in much lower, much closer to our budget and our original estimated cost. Where we're at with it right now is taking some recent revelations in material types. We have some cast out there as recently as last week, double checking, making sure on a few different line locates and whatnot. We've determined we have some cast and different types of material, not near as much transite as we had from the original feedback. And we're taking a hard look at this again and see if we can even narrow that scope of work down even further. So I know the city wants to move forward pretty quickly with this project. They were hoping to have this on their agenda next week for award. So we're doing some pretty quick footwork to see where we can narrow the scope down and get them our direction.
Also, Mr. Chairman, the city, we had this on our agenda at our last meeting, but we pulled it because we felt that, to make sure everything be in sync. So we pulled it, so it would be on our next meeting, our next agenda, first week in February for the water of the contract.
Correct. So happy to answer any questions on the L Street project. Okay. Moving along to Sea Palms. Give a little history on this one quickly. It was originally you'll see this on the capital project list as Alder Circle. It's some money designated. This is leftover SPLOST 5 money. It's about $180,000 from Glenn County SPLOST 5. It was designated or allocated simply as waterline rehabilitation. Sometime before 2015, the project was designated or named as Alder Circle Replacement. Alder Circle is essentially a loop road within Sea Palms, the Sea Palms East development. And with that project, once it was allocated at that time, moved forward with design. EMC was secured. They did a design for an upgrade to an 8-inch essentially for that section. It was per the requirements of SPLOST 5. Glenn County bid the project out for construction. It came back, I think it was, our budget was a little $200-something thousand. It came back at around $400,000. Pulled back, reevaluated on that, and said it may make more sense, especially with the way the pricing was coming in. Let's see how we can better serve, still satisfy the waterline rehabilitation, and then also the waterline upgrades that are called out in the master plan within Sea Palms. And what we got at the table right now to utilize this money, been in close discussions with Glenn County. There are 3 crossings across Frederica Road that enter Sea Palms development. Right now it's basically a network of 6-inch transite lines all throughout. There's 4-inch transite, and I believe there's even some galvanized lines in some of the streets. First thing we really need to do is let's get the 12-inch stub out, or the 8, 10, 12, whatever we deem, the stub outs, the improved crossings across Frederica Road. Any improvements you do within the development you don't reap the benefit from that until you at least get the connection to that 12-inch main on Frederica Road made. So, of course, when you talk about crossing Frederica Road, you're talking about you can do it 2 ways. You can road cut, major artery on the road, on the island, or you can directionally bore. So what we're doing right now is pricing those 2 options to do. and we'll be coming back in the future with a staff recommendation to utilize this money for those road crossings. Either
Are we gonna do the bore, or we will have to contract that out?
we would have to contract that out. We do not have the equipment or capabilities to do that.
And when do you
in-house.
think we can have that contracted out?
We, as soon as we could get together the scope of work and advertise, I had a meeting with Public Works, Glynn County last week. They're supporting the project. They, of course, would like us to bore if possible. They did say that they would support a road cut, or we're garnering final support for that, but I told them we're gonna come back here, evaluate the two, and do some pricing, and then put out, seek out some pricing to do that.
And that way we could get the splash funds spent, right?
Exactly.
We need to do that.
Exactly. The chairman said it, county's got a really big push to get all that old SPOS 5 and 6 money spent. Correct.
Okay.
It's a good use for that money, and it satisfies the original requirement as it was advertised.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you. Is it at a point on Frederica that if you had to reroute traffic through CPOM, something you could, or is it a point where there's no alternative routes? I'm curious.
You could reroute traffic.
Some places there's no option.
Some places, right. The southernmost connection is to make the main loop through CPOMs, and we've done some water modeling, and we have, we've already done some engineering to size the mains and everything to upgrade within CPOMs. Likely an 8-inch loop through the main artery down at Colonial up to Windward would be the most logical. There's a Palm connection in the middle there that maybe a third connection, but at least Windward, Colonial and Windward would make the most sense right now. So.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Next item is the Whitlock Avenue Interceptor video update. Mr. Burris?
Yes, sir. Southeast Pipe has been under contract for about 2 weeks now to do gravity inspections on the lines below lift stations 4035 to the plant on Whitlock Avenue. A portion of that had been lined previously. That was requested to be cleaned and TV'd. That is what they have started on. They have got through about half of the existing lined portion. That was lined 6-7 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. And to date, we actually, me and Ty were actually in a PACP class with the guy from Southeast Pipe this week, and he has told us that so far all the existing line pipe is in good shape. We do have some manholes that are not in good shape, but that was to be expected. They have not started TVing the sections that are not lined yet, but the fact that the liner is still in good shape is certainly going to reduce the cost of having to line that entire line all over again. So they've got through about 25% of the total project scope thus far. They've done, this is yesterday's totals, they're up to 4,000 feet of pipe, and they've done 12 of the 60 manholes.
Don't they have a month to do the work?
That's correct.
So they've only got 2 more weeks?
Yes, sir. They got started about a week behind, but they are rapidly making progress now.
This is one of the main interceptor lines that feed Academy Creek plant, and it's a 30-inch concrete pipe, so it's...
Yeah, it's a 30-inch
We'll have
concrete
good
pipe,
information
and it
on it.
goes to a 36 and then 42, so it's large diameter pipe. But so far, they're making good progress. Like I said, we have we cleared all the right-of-ways, located a few manholes, had some people move some vehicles off of some manholes, so we've got them all open for them thus far.
Thank you. The next item is a sewer system extension, Highway 341 north of Community Road.
Yes, sir. Got 2 good things to report on that. As you know, the existing extension with the cooperative agreement with Friendly Express was to shoot water and sewer under 303 to provide water access to their, past the new filling station that's going in there. The water line is under 303. The sewer line, the casing has been put under 303. They're either putting in the sewer line today or tomorrow on that. So, might have jumped the gun just a hair on the discussion on that one. But, with that being said, we're about to have water and sewer across 303. We do have a potential customer at the old pumpkin patch location that is interested to tie on to that new sewer line once it gets across. It will be a low pressure connection for them because that is force main the whole way, all the way down past the church. But with that being said, that is encouraging to see it under there and that we have some interest. I've been looking at cost estimates to do some of the neighborhoods that have been brought up previously. The problem with doing that is knowing the participation level, people that are interested. If everyone in the neighborhood in, say, Ellis Point participated, you'd probably be looking at 12 to 15,000 per person, counting the low-pressure system and then their portion of the community force main would have to be come down through there. If not everyone participates, it could end up being $20,000 or $30,000 a person, depending on how many people are interested in participating. So we have not approached them yet about that, simply because we're trying to make sure we have the sewer system across there available before they start coming in and saying they want to tie on, if they did, when we didn't have the sewer available. So we are in the process of working out how to contact them, and if we're going to send some letters out and see if they're interested. We'll give them some, here's the general cost estimate, and depending on how many people are interested, this is what it would cost.
Well, not only do you have Ellis Point, but you also got all the commercial along 341 north
That's
of there
correct.
too,
That's correct.
above the pumpkin patch.
That's correct.
And what about all of the area north of Community Road on the opposite side of 341?
We do not currently have sewer on the other side over there. So we would have to bore back under,
But we've got a force main coming right through there, so we could tie on to it, so, pretty close, so.
Right. Part is about as far north as sewer goes on the east side of 341.
So what do we need to do? Do we need to have a study? Do we need to authorize a study to see how much this is gonna cost so we can
I mean, we
plan?
can
Because we
throw
don't-
some cost estimates out there. It's one of those somewhat like Mr. Junkin was saying earlier, $12,000 to $15,000 might not be too bad if you've got a failing septic tank, but it may be cheaper to replace your septic tank than if it's gonna cost you $30,000 because only half the neighborhood's interested in doing it.
I understand that, and we might have to upfront some of the cost, but we need to extend our system and serve these people, if at all possible. I mean, they've got 50-year-old septic tanks. And there's other areas, there's some in Brunswick that we need to talk about.
Yes,
So, what do we need to do to get this moving?
Mr. Chairman, we met this week, and we're breaking out all the cost, building the cost matrix of what it would take, depending on the situation in a given neighborhood. You know, are they already water customers but on septic tank? Are they private private water and septic tanks? Do they want to convert to ours? Do they want to keep the private water but put in sewer service? Todd's going to work with his staff and give us the matrix of cost. And again, the variances that Mr. Burrows pointed out, you know, how many want to get on it will impact the overall cost. So we can, as soon as we get that, and I've asked him to take a look at it and see how quickly they can turn that around. And I was going to give him a month to turn those numbers around to us so that we could then, in turn, you know, as Mr. Burris said, send out the letters and those kind of things and figure out on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. And we're going to have to set it at some minimal number. If it's below a certain number of potential households, we don't chase those. You know, we won't be able to do anything without spending a fortune on each house. But we're working on it, is what I'm trying to say.
Full participation of every person that's in Ellis Point, you said would make it $15,000?
Roughly, yes, sir. So that's Ellis Point, Anderson Landing, I think it's called. They're kind of interconnected neighborhoods right there. Based off the parcel count, not all those homes are built, but you'd have to spec for the lots that aren't built out yet. There's roughly 180 homes in there, so that would be all 180 wanting to tie on.
You know, some of these costs could be affected by the way we structure our fees too.
Well, I mean,
Tapping fees.
I'd also look at making it a special,
Combination for the,
That
combination.
$15,000 number does not include anything for a tap fee.
it's not the tap fee too? That's right.
The low pressure system at each house is going to be $7,000 to $9,000, and then their portion of the
Yeah, but-
Own infrastructure.
but that requires a grinder pump.
that's correct.
Okay, so the homeowner becomes responsible for that.
Or I mean, we talk about the grinder pump a lot, and I know that's doable. You know, there is one other option that we could take a look at, that certainly the step systems. Might be a little bit
Yeah, then, yeah, that has its,
drawbacks, I know.
yeah. I mean, then you get into the septic business, essentially, because in my opinion, the step system is nothing more than,
A glorified septic tank.
that's right.
I understand.
Well, we have capacity, so we need to serve these people if at all possible.
Yes, sir.
And they're residents of Glynn County, and some of them have failing septic tanks, whether they know it or not. So I think we need to give it a priority to see how in the world we can serve as many of these people as possible, provide them service.
So the low-pressure system, that just takes the place of a gravity system?
Right. Basically, you have a grinder pump at your house that pumps into a community force main, and it's pumped all the way to the next gravity system downstream. We have a few of these in the system already. The Frederica development and Pikes Bluff, all of that's already low pressure, so it works to a certain extent. It also reduces I&I on low pressure because there's not any access points for rainwater to get in.
That just prevents you from having to do a gravity system with a pump system.
That's correct.
Or
And it is usually
Spain.
substantially cheaper to
Sure,
do
yeah.
that than to put in gravity lines and pump stations.
Okay. Normally, who pays for the pump?
I guess that would be up to the commission.
Well, and other utilities?
These systems have typically been put in Glynn County by the developers when they go in. We've never went back and retrofitted one. And so typically the homeowner pays for it, but, you know,
So, but the developer, when they're put in, has paid for it?
that's correct.
The system right now is designed, Friendly Express is gonna have a grinder pump.
That's correct.
Christian Renewal has grinder pumps.
Right.
I think the apartments behind it has grinder pumps, so all of that small area right in there has a pressure system anyway.
Right, yeah. Pressure systems are cost-effective ways to provide sewer access, relatively.
Well, I just know the one time that this organization offered that to on a homeowner association, the blowback was pretty bad.
Next item is December 2018 month-end financial statements.
Commissioners, you have in your packages the financial statements through December 31st of 18, the first 6 months of the fiscal year. Beginning with the balance sheet. The third line down, the accounts receivable net of allowance for bad debts, you'll see that is continuing to decline. And you'll also note in the note to or the title to the left that the reserve for bad debts has decreased from $1.978 million down to $1.548. We're going through a process of looking through old accounts that still have balances on them that have had no activity for the last 60, 90 days, and looking at the information we have available for those customers and turning them over to collections or writing them off as non-collectible, because we either don't have enough information for it or it's turned over to collection. And once that's done, we write those off the books. Yep. If the collection agency does wind up collecting on it, of course, we do receive some of that back net of their commission. The consequence of that is, as you'll see later, is the bad debt expense for the year is exceeding budget for the first 6 months, and probably will for the balance of the year. The second thing on the balance sheet, under restricted cash accounts, the JWSC reserves, capital reserves, and SPLOST accounts, you'll see all have significant increases in the first 6 months of the year. The monies are continuing to accumulate there, awaiting the expenditures on projects to come in and pay for those. Later on in one of the next statements, the project report, you'll see that most of that cash is dedicated to projects, but we just haven't expended the cash as yet. And the next thing is the accounts receivable. You see at the end of June, we're $1.2 million. They're down to $340,000 at the end of December. That's largely just a timing issue as to when the invoices come in, when they get paid. It tends to slow down around Christmas time and the holidays, so we don't have quite as many invoices outstanding at that point. Those are my only comments on the balance sheet, unless someone has questions.
Your last line, 132 million, is that basically, I mean, there's no label on it. Owner's equity,
It's net position. It's really just that number represents the cumulative revenues over expenditures from beginning of, actually,
Inception.
the beginning of the city and the county systems that was transferred to the JWSC in our formation. That
it's just a number that keeps
it's
piling up.
It's similar to equity numbers on a corporate balance sheet. It's how much the owner's net position is in the company. In our case, being the government, it's called net position.
So like a net present value?
No.
No, net present value is a financial
Okay.
number, but it's, for lack of a better word, it's a plug number of, we've accumulated this number of assets, we have this amount of liabilities, and it goes back to the accounting formula of assets equal liabilities plus equity. The net position is essentially the equity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, following the balance sheet is the schedule of all of the cash balances. And you'll see under the reserves, the operating reserve, well, those reserves have two components. There's cash sitting at BB&T Bank for immediate needs, and then there are investment accounts for to increase our interest earnings. And I'll have more on the investment accounts in a minute. Following the next statement is the combined revenue statement for the first 6 months. See that our revenues are running about $1.178 million ahead of budget, and our operating expenditures are about $1.15 million under budget for the year, for a net operating revenue of $6.8 million. And then we with the bad debt, interest expense, debt principal, and transfers to reserves, in actual terms, we have $2.195 million of revenues over cash needs. And when we factor in the outstanding encumbrances, we're just over $500,000 to the good so far this year. Of course, those encumbrances may not be liquidated until, or over the next 6 months. So we are doing well in terms of revenue and expenditures.
Yeah, it looks like we're doing well.
The next statement's the overtime report, and this does reflect the budget adjustments that were approved by the commission in December. Then moving on is the project report for the first 6 months of the year.
I noticed this one doesn't have a projection, I guess, for lack of a better term, annualized. Could we add that to this one too?
On the combined statement of revenues, there is.
It's back on the previous page?
Yes, sir. There are 2 pages back, I think. It's the 3rd page in.
It's got overtime on it?
Oh, the overtime report. No,
I just meant,
I don't have a projection to year end.
Yeah, all I'm asking is it's just so helpful to us to be able to look at a snapshot and see how we're projected to end. I mean, you've added that on other sheets, I was just seeing if you could add it on this one.
Okay.
It's just helpful to be able to look and say, this is where we stand, and this is ultimately what the whole budget is, but this is how we project to land relative to budget.
And there are some, if you look at the budget versus the expenditures, there are some anomalies in there that explain those differences. But I'll put in the estimated to year end on that one as well.
That's all I'm asking. I always call it annualized, or whatever you want to call it.
Back to the project report, the top portion of this is the list of projects that are on our books right now, the budgeted costs, the costs that were incurred up to the end of the last fiscal year. And the next column over the fiscal year, this fiscal year, actual expenditures, actual cash out the door on these projects is about $718,000. And that relatively low amount actually of cash expended on the projects is the reason for the increase in the cash reserves that are being held. If you, when we look across to the balance to complete those projects, there's about $22 million of balance to complete on those projects. And
That's left to spend,
yes,
left to complete.
that includes the SPLOST projects.
And that includes the SPOS, 10 million plus, I guess.
Then at the, on the bottom of the page is the actual reconciliation of the actual cash balances. So the amount of cash on hand at, or in accounts at June 30th, how much has been transferred to those reserves from operations for the first 6 months, and in the case of SPLOST, the amount of SPLOST that's been received from the county, and the capital improvement fees that have been collected from customers who have tapped into the systems. Then minus the expenditures year to date to give the current balance of funds, then the balance is needed to complete the projects and the encumbrances that are outstanding on those projects, which gives the final column is the balance that we have available to commit to new projects.
So the accounting then at the bottom of the page answers the question that I was going to ask you. And
hopefully.
And tell me if it doesn't. Then we have 22 million to complete, 22.5 to complete. And at the bottom of the page, if we add the 12,257,000
and the 10,884,
and the 10,884,
yes, sir.
that shows us where the money's coming from
Yes, sir.
to get the 22 million.
Yes, sir.
So 6.9 is coming from repair and replacement reserve, and 5.3 from capital improvement fund reserves.
Yes, sir. And each of the projects you'll see has a source of funding listed next to it on the top portion.
And we end up with 6.6 million left in reserve,
In cash.
in those two reserves,
In cash that's not committed to on a project at the current time.
not committed, right, that we could commit. Great.
On project number 806, Academy Creek Oxygen System Rehab, didn't we increase the budget on that from 650 to another number?
We did, this is the report as of December 31st,
Okay,
and that was done at the last meeting.
all right.
Mr. Donaghy, on page 3, you've got up at the top, all the operating revenues. You've got other income as, a line item. Should we look at separating other income out and having pulling interest income out of that now that we're really going to look at starting to invest some money and being able to get some interest expense so that we can kind of, we as commission can kind of.
I could pull out some, in the interest of trying to fit it all on one
Sure,
page.
sure. And it hadn't been a big number in the past, but now that hopefully it's going to be, instead of lumping it in as a miscellaneous, I just think it's worth knowing what our overall interest income is on an annual basis, and we can kind of track and trend that and ultimately benchmark it. And then, the tower rentals and stuff like that can still be lumped into miscellaneous. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense.
And those numbers are actually in the read-ahead materials that you have. There are some spreadsheets in there that are actual line by line by line. These are very condensed numbers.
Sure. But, I mean, ultimately, I'd argue that probably that interest income is probably going to exceed planning and construction fees income. It's a line item. I personally would like to see interest income as a line item. I mean, if nobody else wants to do that, or if you don't think it's relevant.
Certainly doable.
I'd like to see it.
And then the other question I was going to ask you, and forgive me if I'm dreaming this up, or correct me if I'm dreaming this up, but am I right in that right before I came on the commission, y'all refinanced some bonds.
Yes, sir.
And that obviously saved a lot of interest expense. And in that first year, it was a really big savings one time in the first year.
Yes, sir.
But from years 2, 3, 4, and 5, it was gonna continue to go up. So are we expecting a big hit from an interest expense in this upcoming fiscal year comparatively to the last previous year?
There's actually, going forward, the interest expense actually decreased about $200,000 a year.
I know
more
it
or
decreased
less.
over a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, but I was thinking this
Well,
first year was really, really low.
Well, it actually decreased going forward. 'Cause that was one of the reasons for refunding the bonds, was there was savings to be had over the remaining term of the bonds. The biggest piece of the savings was in the first, we refunded them in December, and the savings kicked in up until about September, where the 2010 bonds had a debt service reserve of $3.8 million, and in the refunding, that $3.8 million was not required to be held in that reserve anymore. So we took that and effectively stopped making interest and principal payments or transfers to the trustee for payment to the bondholders, and instead diverted that money into the repair and replacement reserve to supplement that. So, and that actually ran out mid-August.
So what I'm trying to ask, and I apologize if I'm being thick-headed or confusion here, but you got 2018 fiscal year, which is up here. 2019 went way down to here. 2020, it's gonna be higher than 19, but still lower than 18, is that not correct?
It'll be higher than 2020's debt and interest will be higher than 2019, yes.
Right, but still lower than 18.
But
which-
still much lower.
Right,
than
right.
18, yeah.
So I guess what I'm asking then, it's going up considerably this year as compared to last year. And are
it'll
we,
go
as
up
we're
to-
starting to prepare the budget, are we starting to account for that? Because I just remember last year that being like I want to say it was $800,000 number.
Yeah, it was a large number last year, but that's because of the savings being captured up front in the
That's my
in the
point. So
refunding. And-
all that
and the
savings
debt
was moved
service
into
reserve.
capital in 1 year. This year, we want to continue to fund capital at the rate we did in 19. We're going to have to find other funding in order to be able to make our budget look like 19's.
Did we
To
not
some
just-
extent.
Do we not just take the normal interest payment we would have made and add that to our capital funding?
Yes, that's
So
what we did.
we kept the same amount in the budget, it just is transferred to capital.
So I'm saying this year, we won't be able to transfer as much to capital.
Right.
So if we as a
that-
commission want to continue to transfer to capital, transfer to capital, transfer to capital, we need to find another funding source or savings somewhere else, cost avoidance somewhere else at least, because we're going to have to be hit with a higher interest expense.
Yes, that would be true.
So I guess, so the question then is, are we looking now, as we start preparing the budget, at where we can look heavily at saving across the organization so that we can continue to put money into capital without going to our ratepayers and asking for a rate adjustment?
Actually, that process is gonna start Monday.
Okay.
All of the division heads have their operational budgets due in by tomorrow. So we'll be going through them individually over the next week or 10 days and fine tuning those.
Does that make sense, what I'm asking, or what I'm trying to say?
It makes sense, yes, because last year,
We have free money, basically.
we had
that
free
can
money
put in
last
capital.
year. In order to meet the same budget
Yes,
this year,
that's
we're gonna
right.
have to come up with that free money.
Exactly.
We are starting to see, and he's gonna identify where that is, I think, starting Monday, is what you just said, but we are seeing
Well,
savings, like the, probably, maybe $150,000 that came from the audit of the power bills. Another $200,000 that we've identified that's coming in interest, from the investments. And I don't know how this is gonna show up as far as where to use it, but right there's $350,000 that we didn't budget for. And then we found this GEMA money, or FEMA money of $425,000. That money. So the money should be showing up in places, it's just gonna be hard to channel it, I think.
But remember the FEMA money, it was money making up
Spending.
for unexpected expenditures from disasters.
And that occurred last year.
Last
Yeah.
year and the years before that.
So we've already closed those books.
Yes.
And this is money this year.
Yeah, that wasn't built into the reach and budget this past year or this year.
Making the sweeping assumption that the next 6 months follows the first 6 months in terms of performance and budget execution, we should be able to, at the end of the fiscal year, make a substantial additional transfer to the reserves. Again, that's a sweeping generalization.
Because our net revenue is
We still have 6 months of the year to go.
high.
I just remember being concerned last year when we set the budget, that we went up 2%, plus we went up really about 2% more if you take into account the $800,000 in interest that we moved to capital, for lack of a better term. So I just want to make sure that we're aggressively looking at budgets, understanding that, you know, if our goal is to continue to fund capital like we've been doing, we've got to find money to offset that new interest expenses coming up. And I just hope we're aggressively looking for it, so we don't have to go back to our ratepayers and ask for another rate increases.
I think you're right about that.
Jimmy, also the GFA loan repayment, that needs to be factored in. What is that?
It is
gonna be?
factored in.
Okay.
What we did when we did the capital plan, 5-year capital plan, we set up originally for a $5 million per year capital
Okay.
list. What we did after we talked about this loan, we're taking the amortization payments, principal and interest, right off the top of that $5 million before we budget the other projects.
Now, let me make sure I understand. The savings that we got off the interest, that did not go into the operating budget, is that correct?
No.
It
That-
only went into
That's
the
what,
capital?
that's what,
Okay,
that
and that went into the R&R account,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes,
And we're still on track for the 5 million.
yes.
So I don't necessarily agree with you
yeah, I was gonna say,
that we have to find new money, because the plan has been
$5
at
million.
5 million based on our rate structure.
Well, if we plan to keep putting that same amount in,
yeah, but the money that we recovered, if I'm understanding it from the refinance, it was like a windfall above and beyond the
Yeah.
5
Yeah,
million we
that was
programmed.
above.
right, no, I agree, but I mean, if we want to
We're not
continue to
gonna
put in.
we're not gonna budget for above the
Oh,
5
well,
million.
I think that's a discussion we need to have.
We're gonna have a
Okay, that's-
finance committee, and let's let that.
Yeah.
let's
Well,
be at the
sorry,
finance
I mean,
committee.
at that point, you're talking about a rate increase.
Yes.
Or savings from operations.
But if we
Well-
hold it at 5 million, there won't be an increase.
If we hold it at 5 million, but if we go, you know, if we look at what we're able to put in extra, I just think we should, you know, look aggressively for, you know, operational savings is my point.
I think so too.
I agree, I mean, but like the
What?
chairman said, we're gonna have a financial,
Okay.
What did you say, Mayor?
I say I agree too. Mr. Chairman, let me transition here. You know, looking for money, you know, looking at this overtime report. And are we aggressively trying to hold down our overtime too as well?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we are.
Month of December, the overtime payments was only $8,000, so for the entire month, for all divisions. So we're at $180,000 for the 6-month period. So you had $172,000 in 5 months, and then December had $8,000. So we are curbing that overtime.
So is our administrative services, how's that coming along?
That was largely at the beginning of the fiscal year, when there was a very concentrated effort at collecting on old accounts and doing cutoffs. A large percentage of that was incurred during July and August.
Okay, but now that has tapered off, that's not happening anymore?
It's tapering off, yes.
Yeah. Right, well, where we can find savings, that's what we need to be doing. As I said, I agree with Commissioner Stevens that we don't want to increase our ratepayers, the rate.
As another example, the overtime for the purchasing division is quite high, but that was all incurred during the transition over from being part of system pumping and maintenance over to the purchasing division.
Really?
That's tapered off to almost nothing.
They're on call, so, and in my budget before, nobody was on call, so I didn't have any budgeted overtime for on call when these folks came over.
As I mentioned before, there are some anomalies causing that, but that were earlier in the year, and those have been eliminated. And as Mr. Burrow stated, overtime is very much tightened down.
Okay. Keep an eye on it.
Mr. Donahue, yesterday we received, somebody printed out this packet, and I think it was a report that maybe you had prepared and sent to us electronically. And I just wanted to say, I had a lot of fun going through this packet. There are a lot of numbers here, but I thought it was well done. It's very comprehensive, and presentation, I guess, is everything, because I'm not sure that the numbers are any different than we've seen in the past, but the categories and the bolding and underlining and all those sorts of things that set out the numbers really helped it.
That's some much-needed assistance and enhancement to the finance division that Ms. Roberts has brought with her hire in September. It's helped out a lot.
So I wanted to say that. Thank you.
And I apologize for not having the handout that Ms. Meredith just brought around. But this is a summary of the investment accounts that we have at BB&T right now. We're working on the three capital monies reserves, the R&R on capital improvement funds and capital reserve right now. We don't have statements on those to present it in this fashion. These are the monies in the operating reserve and the customer deposit reserves that are invested. The top part of each of those is a summary of what's in the investment account right now, being the actual investments. These are all in either Treasury notes or federal agencies, like Federal Federal Home Loan Bank, and two or three other federal agencies. They're all government bonds or government notes. In the operating reserve, the actual cost of those was $5.947 million. When we purchase the bonds, we have to, if it's between interest payment dates, we have to purchase the interest that's accrued on those. And then the next one is the amount of cash that's still on hand at the end of December, $60,922. And then principal cash is money that's been received but not rolled over into the interest-bearing cash account. So the total value of that account is $6,011,000. Below that, we put $6 million in that in principal. We've earned $15,600 in interest. Had fees of $3,900, which reconciles back to the $6,011,000 of the value of the fund. Down at the bottom, based on the holdings that are in that investment reserve, the annualized income, which is the face value of the bonds times the interest rate on the investment, would be $102,181. Which, based on what we paid for the bonds, is 1.72%, and based on the face value of the bonds is 1.68%. And the same computations hold true for the customer reserve at the bottom.
So is we're talking about the operating reserve?
Yes, sir.
And the 2.63 to 3% because of the fees involved actually becomes 1.6 to 1.8?
No, it's the difference between the 1.68 is the interest rate, taking the face value of the bond, $100,000 at 1.75%. That is what we actually receive in cash, but all of these things are sold at discounts. Largely all of them are sold at discounts. So what we paid for the bond makes the interest received the rate on the interest received slightly higher.
That's the yield.
Yeah.
That's the correct term.
So the yield is how much? What percentage?
Percent.
On a
That's the
composite basis,
2.63.
1.72.
What?
On a composite basis for the portfolio as a whole, 1.72.
Okay.
Complete the yield. The discount that we paid for the bond plus the interest earned the total yield is 1.71.
Okay.
I did look at the current treasury rates, and the interest rates have gone up to some. Right now, we have a composite or face value rate of 1.68. As of yesterday, bonds were selling for 2.34 to 2.51, which may present some opportunity for increased earnings by selling some of the bonds that we have now and repurchasing higher rate bonds. But we'll have to look to see what the fees are for those transactions. We'll also have to look at what the discount would be on the bonds that we sell, because those are at a lower rate. We bought them at a discount. Market rate has gone up, so that discount's going to be greater. So there's a potential loss on the disposition of those bonds, which could offset any increased interest earnings that we have.
And the bonds we're buying are all government securities?
They're all government securities. They're either
Federal, municipal?
They're either treasury notes or government agencies.
Now, is something like treasurydirect.gov available to us? I mean, where it's available to an individual, where you can buy those bonds without any fees?
It is, but that would be much more labor intensive for us to do. When we set up these investment accounts, we went over with BB&T what our cash needs were with those. For instance, the operating reserve has a slightly higher yield than the customer deposit reserve, because we don't expect those monies to be necessary for any period of time. That's a reserve in case we're closed down for 2 months for a hurricane, so those monies can go out further. Whereas with the customer deposits, we're trying to get those refunded to not refunded to customers, but applied to their accounts, so that cash may need to come back in more quickly, so that they're in shorter term investments that aren't earning quite as much. So, and then we've pretty much restricted BB&T to buying just federal securities, either directly federal securities or agencies. So that reduces the earnings to some extent as well. But to go back in and meet all of those parameters without some professional help that would be very time consuming for us. And as you can see, the rates, the amount that we're charged for their services is not tremendous.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. First of all, we were offsetting this when the interest rates were low, our bank fees, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
So
now we're having higher bank fees because we've done this action, correct?
we will be beginning in January and February.
Okay. I want a report that tells us what the bank fees are each month
We've already started
versus the
that.
interest earned each month,
We've
so we
already
can see
started
if we
that.
made a good decision. And I think anything that's positive is probably a good decision. Okay, the next thing I would like is, aren't there some legal restrictions on what we can do with our deposit money? Isn't there some legal restrictions on what we can actually do with funds that we're holding for projects and our customer deposits and any money that we get in?
As far as the customer deposits, certainly there's a restriction on that. That's customer money.
Uh-huh.
On the capital improvement fees, my understanding is that those are to be held strictly for extensions of the system. The repair and reserve, or operating reserve, capital reserve, and the repair and replacement reserve are all funds that are restricted by action of this commission.
Okay.
So,
So we
there-
can,
You determine the restrictions on those funds.
okay, but where we place that money, aren't there,
Oh, the authorized investments, yes, there are
yes,
restrictions on
I'd
that.
like you to provide us a list of that. Okay, for the
I
next
think
meeting, it's
we're-
not,
I think that was already provided in the financial policies. There's a listing of the
okay, so it's,
best ones. Of course, we still
then
have.
just pull it out and mail it to everybody so that there's a clearer understanding of what we can put our money in.
And what we've defined with BB&T is much more restrictive than our financial policy.
Okay.
And to the chairman's point, I think a lot of this, I think we need to do a deep dive if we're able to form a finance committee and deep dive into some of these things and really take a hard look at them and, give some assistance to you and see if we can, work together on something once that's formed, if it's formed.
That would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next thing is executive director's update. Jimmy?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just did a couple of quick reminders of some things that we've got going on and something coming up. Leadership Institute, we're moving forward with the Leadership Institute. And what is that? Just as a reminder, it's basically a affiliation or a segment of BB&T that goes out and consults with entities making significant change to help them facilitate change. Change is something that we typically as humans are resistant to, and so they've started the process to analyze us and our workings to help us make the initiatives and changes in culture here start to be a reality as based on the things we outlined in the strategic business plan. If anybody needs to look at that again with us in more detail, we'll be glad to pull it out. We've been going through it with our employees, trying to give them the same opportunity to hear what we told you all and give them an opportunity to understand what's going to be coming in the way of expectations and where we want to see culture change in our organization. So that's moving along, and we hope to have this process done in the next 90 days where we've got actual recommendations for how to go about the process and make things as effective and efficient as possible. Next week, I'll be out on Tuesday and Wednesday to go to the GAWP Executive Forum for Large Systems. They do an annual program where they invite the general manager or the director of the utilities around the state into, for lack of a better term, a discussion of all the kinds of issues that are being faced around the state, to hear what's going on, see share ideas for solutions, and just a good networking opportunity so we figure out where the resources are and who's got help. That'll be 29th and 30th. Quick reminder on one of the asset issues that we're wrestling with right now, and a couple things. CPOMS has sewer lines tied to the service, and you'll remember we had that one line that took so long to get repaired because it was deep and corroded and tight situation. We've got sewer lines like that in CPOMS West and CPOMS East. We're going to take part of the funds, we hope, from the GFA loan to fix the CPOMS West lines, which again, they're in such severe and urgent need. We need to be paying attention to those, or we're going to have more incidents. Based on the inspections and assessments we've done, we may have another situation or situations like the one we just experienced this past year. CPOMS East, we've got a similar situation, and we're looking to take the SPLOST 2005 funds that were allocated for the sewer improvements on St. Simon's Island and apply those to that one. Charlie's working with Aaron Mumford to get that resolved, much in the way we did the design funds from 2005, the plant design funds from 2005, SPLOST. That's where we're at on those things. And we talked about the sewer conversion costs. That's my wrap up for the day, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a thank you to you for going to the rising sea level prediction thing at the Chamber and representing as well. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from that, and I've heard several members of the community, mention what a great job you did, and I'd just like to say thank you for attending that and representing us. I wanted to attend, and something came up, and I just couldn't, but I heard it was well done.
It was pretty interesting.
chairman's update. Basically, I just want to thank everybody for coming to the retreat yesterday. I think we had a good retreat, and hopefully we're going to be moving forward, and we're going to be expediting meetings. We will be setting up some committees, but we're not doing that to have more meetings. We're doing it to hopefully have shorter meetings and fewer meetings. But we do need to meet the needs of our customers, and let's always remember that. Do we have a need for an executive session, another executive session?
Yes.
Really?
Mr. Chairman, we need to probably discuss at some point moving the meeting time back an hour. Well, to 1 o'clock.
How does everybody feel about that?
I mean, I don't disagree. I think that's a good idea, but, you know, I'd like to see if the committee has any, if the committee structure has any effect on that before we, I mean, maybe they're mutually exclusive, maybe they're not. Maybe we can do both, but.
I have no issues with the change in time.
Well, I would like to change it to 5 or 6 o'clock at another date. I know, but it conflicts with the county's meeting. That's one thing that it does conflict. It's been brought up to us about our citizens can't attend our meetings because of our time that's been set. So it's merited a discussion, maybe. We can discuss it.
And I tend to agree with that. I mean, and, you know, selfishly, for those of us who work full-time, moving it up early is kind of counterproductive to us that, you know, have full-time jobs. To your point, moving it later in the afternoon is you know, better for the community.
Right.
But, I mean, if we're able to have some immediate impact and some positive change with the committee structure on the meeting times, and hopefully these won't be 3-hour meetings anymore. Hopefully we can vet some of these things.
Right.
I mean, I think the ad hoc committee for the, what do they call it, health benefits renewal thing was a success. I mean, that was a 30-second discussion in here, but it was a 3-hour discussion the other day. We really had a good conversation with the staff. We had a lot of back and forth and discussions and balancing, and I mean, I just thought went very well, and we're able to do that on some more issues and get some of the things answered outside of the full commission meeting. I believe that it's positive.
Right.
It's not going to work if we have the exact same discussion at the committees that we have at the full meeting, but if we're able to do what I think you're wanting to do and trying to do, moving the time up may not be required.
Right.
I move to go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
For property, yeah.
executive session.
A second.
You got a form for us both though, I guess.
I'll round up the other two, excuse me.
Yeah, let's get two more in here so we can vote.
Fellas, we need to
Oh, we got a-
convene so we can,
Vote it out.
Sorry, I didn't realize that. I thought we were adjourned.
No. We have to come back in here and do that.
Yeah, you're right. We're not up on the parliamentary.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
We've already got a motion and a
Oh,
second.
I thought you said I need a motion.
All in favor, raise your right hand.
2, 3, 4, 5.
We adjourn executive session.
Oh, you like, I'm sorry.
Now, do we need a motion to adjourn?
I never thought we did, but
Let's have a motion
Do
to
we have to-
adjourn the meeting.
what? All right,
I'll make
go
a
ahead.
motion.
Second.
Second to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Yeah, we, all in favor? All right, let's go.
We adjourn.
Yeah. It's gotta be a quick one.
All right,
I
I'll
gotta
walk
go,
you to your car.
I gotta go sign some documents.
Right here first.
Walk me down the road.
We'll just step this. Okay.